I love cozy games. It's true, I'm not immune to propaganda. If your game has a warm aesthetic with a cozy vibe, flashbanging me with tender pastel colors and whimsical upbeat music, I'm usually sold. In my youth, I enjoyed games like Harvest Moon, Animal Crossing, and Chow Raising in the Sonic Adventure series. And in my recent years, I've adored games like Slime Rancher, Rune Factory, and even Cult of the Lamb, which we talked about in the last video. Go check it out. But as much as I love them, cozy games are the crux of an endemic in the games industry. They're very successful as marketing tools. They get people's eyes on them, and the art style alone is enough to make people want to purchase and try them. This isn't the issue. The issue is engagement. Many cozy games suffer from a lack of engaging features, mechanics, and friction. Friction is the most important aspect here, and we've discussed it on this channel quite a bit. But what do I mean? Of course, the point behind a lot of these games is to create a sandbox of sorts. Sandbox games are meant to allow the player to do whatever they want with the game's mechanics. There's no right or wrong way to play, but sometimes that's precisely the problem. Games like Minecraft succeed because it's so open-ended. There's no limit to what people can create, and there's limitless potential for players to create their own challenges and goals. Minecraft is a unique example and an outlier in the data. Other games, unfortunately, just can't match that level of open-ended creative play. As a result, players will often sink hundreds of hours into these games, complete their initial gameplay goals, and then be left wondering, well, now what? As a result, many players drop off from the game. Now, is this inherently a bad thing? No, not exactly. There's nothing wrong with a game showing its stuff, taking you through the experience, and then concluding its business and allowing you to move on to other ventures. The problem comes from when players want to do more. Have you ever finished a game's core objectives, been told you can do whatever you want, and then just kind of are left feeling empty? You've been working to this point, you've fantasized about your endgame, but now that you're here, it all kind of feels empty. This is the problem with cozy games as a genre. Most of them are trying to take what is essentially a tone and artistic style, cozy, and trying to let that carry the player through the entire experience. But cozy isn't a genre. It isn't a set of mechanics. It's not a collection of features. It's just precisely that, a style of tone. And while tone and art direction can do a lot for your game, it can't carry it on its own. However, some games manage to strike a perfect balance. The atmosphere is warm, the colors are bright, the characters are adorable, and there's just enough going on to keep the player engaged and coming back for more. And when they put the game down, they feel like they're ready to move on. They walk away from the game satisfied, ready to gush about it to their friends or make a very long YouTube video essay about it. The point of engagement in a game isn't to keep the player playing forever, but to allow them to feel satisfied and complete when they do put it down. And that's what the cozy game genre is missing. Today, we're going to talk about cozy games as a genre and its impact on the industry, but I also want to put a single game at the forefront of this conversation as an example of one that does everything right. Witchspring R. It's warm, it's cozy, and it's absolutely going to punch you in the gut with its emotional storytelling. This game manages to use its narrative to tackle themes and topics like abandonment, childhood trauma, religious persecution, loss, grief, and even genocide, while constantly using its incredibly cozy and cute aesthetic to always bring the player back to a feeling of safety and sending a very important message. In the darkest of times, the most important thing you can do is find the beauty in the world and the comfort of your friends and family. That said, as we dive into Witchspring R, the narrative will deal with some difficult subject matter: persecution, loss, even cultural annihilation. While this might be uncomfortable for some viewers, I'm going to be here with you every step of the way to examine these themes thoughtfully and respectfully. But before we dive headfirst into the subject of today's video, let's establish some context. We're going to address the state of cozy games in the games industry, what they do well, what they could improve on, and showcase a few examples of cozy done right that balances their signature aesthetic and vibes with just the right amount of friction and engagement. A game can certainly be cozy, but a game cannot survive on cozy. The phenomenon we just discussed is what many people refer to as Cozyslop, used to describe this recent proliferation of games with sickeningly sweet vibes and excessively kawaii characters meant to lure you in, and it works. But why is that a problem? What's not to love about these cute art styles? One could argue it's a breath of fresh air for this to be happening when video games have historically been perceived as a haven for virtual violence and dark, edgy narratives. The answer lies not within the game's art style or the vibe they're trying to envelop you in, but something far more basic and fundamental: the gameplay. These games are overly reliant on their aesthetics, oftentimes layering them over shallow mechanics, empty progression loops, and the simulation of comfort rather than actual comfort. Many players will pick up and adore these games for a good while, but then drop them rather abruptly for one reason or another. Now let me clarify, there's nothing wrong with a game being finished, as I stated before. Not every game has to be a forever game. But as I said before, what matters is whether or not the player walks away from the game satisfied, and this is where a lot of the cozy games appear to struggle. Let's dive into some history here. In 2020, the COVID pandemic struck. It was devastating. The virus's long incubation period meant that by the time people knew they were infected with it, they had already spread it. The virus wreaked havoc on urban centers and resulted in governments across the world imposing social and economic restrictions to stem the spread of the virus while scrambling for a vaccine. Among these measures was a shutdown or stay indoors policy for many people deemed non-essential workers.
Quite simply, stay at home.
Stay at home.
Stay at home.
Stay at home.
All outside and physical activity has been banned.
Non-essential state business that has to be conducted in person will have to wait.
Suddenly, most people were confined to their homes for long periods of time and left only for essential supplies. It was lonely, isolating, and depressing. But at the onset of the pandemic came a small burst of hope for gamers: Animal Crossing: New Horizons. Released in March 2020 for the Nintendo Switch, New Horizons captivated longtime fans of the genre. Many of the children who played the original Animal Crossing for the GameCube back in 2001 are now young adults, trapped in their homes with almost nothing to do. It was a perfect storm. New Horizons saw critical and commercial success, with a critic score of 90 and going on to sell over 48 million copies worldwide. The original Animal Crossing put you in the shoes of a wayward traveler seeking to plant roots in a new town. Years later, Animal Crossing New Leaf would put the player in charge of an entire town as the mayor, and now, New Horizons seeks to make you the administrator of an entire island settlement. The gameplay loop consisted of exploring, gathering items, crafting, and completing tasks assigned to you by Tom Nook to progress the narrative and unlock new features. The premise of the game is simple: work your way up and develop your island to acquire the tools to customize it as you see fit. The game operated on your console's internal clock on a real-world timescale, meaning the game rewarded you for playing in small bursts and making it part of your daily routine. Seasonal events and occasional updates from Nintendo would keep the game fresh. People loved this game, including myself. In the dark, isolating period of the COVID pandemic, Animal Crossing served as the emergency therapy we all needed. But it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. Yes, the game was absolutely charming, adorable, and addictive, but the entire game design premise hinged on a singular concept. Once you do all that's asked of you, you'll be able to have unlimited power to develop your island however you want. This seems great on paper, but it's actually the fulcrum upon which the entire game experience begins to turn. If you take a look at the user review scores on Metacritic, you see a result that doesn't quite line up with a game that earns so much commercial and critical success. This is because a peculiar phenomenon began to occur. Once players got through the base game, finished all their required tasks, and unlocked all their tools, they got lost. What gives? You spent all this time gathering crafting recipes, farming bells, turning in Nook miles, all to reach this very moment, and now you have no idea what to do. After a while, the game just starts to feel empty. A pastel void of emotionless, smiling animal villagers and a player character whose smile conceals their latent desire to set the entire island on fire just to feel something. Why do I feel this way? I love this game, I want to love this game, yet you can't escape it. You feel it's finally run its course. Time to put it down. Not because you had a satisfying gaming experience and you're ready to move on, but because of something far more depressing. You're bored. You love Animal Crossing for its premise and its aesthetic, and now that you're kind of done with it but unsatisfied, you want more. So you go onto Steam and notice an explosion of games tagged as cozy. At the time of writing, Steam has over 3,000 titles that are tagged as such. That doesn't mean all of them are actually cozy games, but it does speak to just how popular the tag itself is, and developers are noticing. Many of them carry positive user reviews, but there's a good chunk of them that are mixed or negative. That's because the art style hooks you, so you go head first into the rabbit hole. Some of these games are actually very good, and others are mid at best. But you might notice a disturbing number of games trying to pass as cozy games hitting the market, and it's precisely due to Animal Crossing New Horizons' pandemic therapy success. This phenomenon would go on to birth a wave of what I can only describe as cozy Kickstarters, projects that leaned on cuteness as a marketing strategy shortcut rather than as a core design philosophy. Some delivered, many didn't, and a few straight up imploded. The most infamous example is Puff Pal's Island Skies, a Kickstarter that raised $2.5 million from over 40,000 backers by promising an Animal Crossing-style experience. What followed was controversy, poor communication, outsourcing issues, financial mismanagement, and delays so severe that many now allege the project to be a scam. Multiple lawsuits against Fluffnest, the developer, are ongoing. This is an extreme case for sure, but it illustrates just how lucrative the cozy aesthetic has become and how quickly it was commodified for profit. Other creators on this platform have discussed the issue at length, but I want to throw my hat into the ring and look at why some of these games are so disappointing and why some of them are actually very good. To do that, we need to analyze the rise of Cozyslop in the industry and some human psychology to determine why some of them leave us fulfilled and why some of them end up feeling shallow. As I pointed out earlier, lots of channels have discussed the Cozyslop epidemic in the games industry and pointed to several reasons why these games by and large fall short, but I'm here to take a slightly different approach, a more psychological one. In several of my other videos on this channel, we've discussed friction in games. I've stated before that I think it's one of the most important aspects of game design, and it's true here too. A lot of cozy games fall short on friction, and it makes sense why a developer would want to do this. If the point of your game is to provide safety and feelings of comfort, then it makes sense that you would want to tone down any possible stressors your game might have. One would naturally conclude that friction is something you would want to avoid. But this is a misguided conclusion, one that developers arrive at with a malformed axiom. Friction doesn't have to be stressful, and challenges don't have to jeopardize safety. It all comes down to how you balance the friction and the comfort. The reality is that human brains need tension to feel satisfaction in the things that we do. It's why media companies pour tons of money into researching intensity curves for film, literature, and gaming. For a piece of media to be engaging, it needs to take us through peaks and valleys of intensity before steadily rising into a climax and coasting back down into a resolution. This is Storytelling 101, and it's where a lot of cozy games fall apart. Comfort without contrast just becomes ambient noise to the player, a monotonous cacophony of upbeat music, rainbows, creatures with big ol' eyes, and the subtle sensation of boredom that you spend hours trying to run from. This internal desire we have for tension is called homeostasis in psychology, not the physiological kind that regulates your body, but the emotional kind. It feeds into our narrative desires in the way I just described. Our brains are constantly trying to achieve an equilibrium of emotional states. This isn't done by trying to make us into mellowed-out robots, but by attempting to modulate and balance emotional responses to outside forces, like a thermostat. When it gets too cold, your heating system kicks in to bring the temperature back up to temperate. When it gets too hot, the air conditioner cools the place down a little. This subtle background process of our brains, when activated, provides a level of stimulation and enjoyment when it's done through the safety of media. This is why stories feel satisfying when those intensity curves are crafted properly. The problem with cozy games? Not enough tension. As I said before, friction doesn't have to be inherently stressful or seek to rip away the cozy vibes from your experience. Cozy games are an excellent medium for benign friction to thrive, which is a set of challenges or obstacles in a game meant to be overcome, but in no way serve as a real tangible threat to the experience. There are many examples of this. Stardew Valley operates on strict schedules. Slime Rancher's experience is guided by a volatile market cycle with a benign threat of death that just forces a light restart. Journey leverages mystery and wondrous level design as a form of friction. None of these forms of friction are necessarily going to get most people saturated with cortisol, but it's just enough to make the game engaging while not detracting from the game's intent of being a warm, cozy, and safe experience. Before we dive headfirst into the subject of this video, we need to talk a little bit more about Animal Crossing. We established New Horizons' significance during the COVID pandemic and how it sparked a surge of cozy games after its meteoric commercial success. And we talked a little bit about how it sort of fell off. But we didn't talk about exactly why it fell off. Players began to feel burnt out, especially since so many of them were putting in so many hours of the game during lockdown. The game was designed to be played in short bursts to serve as more of a distraction, but the pandemic left people with little choice. But I don't really agree with overplaying being the reason why players felt burnt out. Like most things that I talk about on this channel, I really think it comes down to design philosophy. The Hedonic Treadmill, a concept unveiled in the early 70s in a paper titled Hedonic Relativism and Planning the Good Society. Authors of this paper describe a tendency for human beings to sort of constantly maintain a baseline level of happiness, regardless of positive or negative events that occur. This goes back to psychological homeostasis that we discussed earlier. Our brains are always trying to keep us at a balanced baseline of emotional stability. Sure, winning the lottery or losing a family member are incredibly emotional events that swing in their own directions, but over time your brain will perform a series of adjustments in order to bring you back to that baseline level of happiness. Yet, paradoxically, the brain also tends to crave intense experiences, so we begin to take steps to chase that intensity once that baseline returns. This is the hedonic treadmill in a nutshell. The main takeaway here is that when we stay in that baseline state of equilibrium for too long, we get bored. The problem with Animal Crossing New Horizons is that once a player has completed the initial objectives in just a few months worth of playing, that equilibrium has persisted for too long. There was nothing new to unlock or discover. The open-ended promise of creation just wasn't enough to keep players engaged, either because the act of creation itself served too shallow with minimal reward, or players simply felt they had nothing left to do once they built their dream island. Imagine working hard your entire life to finally buy your dream house, but then realize you have nothing you want to do in it. That's the problem with Animal Crossing New Horizons. The game plateaus and becomes predictable, and predictability kills engagement. Once cozy becomes routine, it becomes a chore, and chores eventually lead to burnout. So I guess the real question here is, why do some cozy games work and others don't? What is the right amount and type of friction to use? Imagine you live alone, in a bright forest along a vast ocean surrounded by cute creatures and enchanted by magic. You live each day with a simple routine. Wake up, hunt for basic supplies, brew some potions, practice some magic, exercise, and fantasize about your favorite delicious pastry. Then you get to do it all over again. Life is peaceful, serene, you're safe, cozy, even. But in the rear view, tragedy, loss, grief, childhood trauma, exile, loneliness, and the desperate attempts you make each and every day to forget. That's the life of a young witch named Pieberry on the continent of Avelia, a land mired in conflict, ruled by a fanatical church headed by a sinisterly charismatic pope who oversaw the victory in the Spring Wars. You see, this land was once ruled by powerful deities who engineered and designed the machinations of this world and lived alongside humankind. But in their envy and avarice, the humans toppled the gods. Not all humans hated them, though, sometimes deciding to build families with them. The children of these unions were soon dubbed witches, and after the Spring Wars, the Pope's last order of business was to eliminate every last one of them. Knowing their time was at an end, many of the deities opted to hide their children away throughout the world in hopes of sheltering them following their demise. Pieberry is one such witch, and while her character and the world she lives in are abundantly warm and bright, the challenges that lie in her past and future are indeed dark. Could there be a guiding light that can yet save her? This is the premise of Witch Spring R, a Korean RPG released on September 25th, 2023 by KiwiWalks. The interesting thing to note about this game is that it's actually a remake, hence the R in the title. The original Witch Spring was actually a mobile game, released on July 12, 2015 in Korean and October 16, 2015 in English. The team would go on to make 3 more sequels from 2016 to 2019, and would spend the 2020s making a couple remasters and ports, including Witchspring R. In it, you play as the aforementioned Pieberry on her quest for, well, pie and strawberries. Those are her favorite foods, and she decided to name herself after them since she was seemingly abandoned with no name. Pieberry lives a quiet but carefree life in the forest, impressively managing to carve out a stable living for herself despite her absurdly young age. But things get a lot less, well, cozy when the Pope's soldiers discover her retreat and seek to carry out their orders to execute her. In the midst of this, an unassuming merchant stumbles upon her abode and tempts her with one of the most beautiful and delicious pies she's ever seen. One that sparks memories. This pushes Pieberry to leave the safety of her home with her mentor companion Black Joe in search of answers and that delicious pie. What follows is a tale of unimaginable loss, grief, persecution, and conflict as Pieberry begins to piece together the fragments of her past and what this means for her future. But despite all the tragedy and heartbreak at the center of the story, it is masterfully contrasted by the intense feelings of warmth, camaraderie, and love in the form of lost and found family. Pieberry meets so many incredibly loving companions on her journey, and it is this love and companionship where she draws her true strength from. The game's dark narrative is juxtaposed by its incredibly sweet art style, Pieberry's insurmountable positivity, and just all things cute and adorable. This is cozy gaming that doesn't cause you to lose interest. Yes, the game will put you through troubling events. Yes, the game will throw emotional gut punches your way, but you will always have your friends by your side and an upbeat protagonist who all promise you that everything is going to be okay, and you believe it. What makes Witchspring R so memorable is not just the story and its characters, but how it feels to play. Even when things go horribly wrong for Pieberry, the game nudges you towards pacing yourself and taking the time to rest, recover, and play. At the core of Witchspring R's narrative is personal growth and development. And you go through that growth and development with Pieberry as she gradually shifts from child to adolescent. You, the player, serve as the engine that cultivates her growth, and the game hopes to impart a little bit of that growth onto you as well. Not only will Pieberry become stronger as she fights and learns, but she'll also grow emotionally as she begins to unravel how the world around her works and begins to meet new people and form some semblance of that one thing she's never had: family. Witchspring R is a game that hits all the right notes. It's built like a classical turn-based RPG, but with a few distinctions. Firstly, the combat has a unique flow to it. As you progress, Pieberry will unlock new abilities that change the flow of combat, as certain powerful abilities become available based on how long you've been in combat. One example is the critical hit system. The game may randomly reward you with critical hits like any other RPG, but every few turns you're guaranteed a more powerful, strategic crit. If you like big numbers and watching number go up, this will be incredibly satisfying for you. Outside of combat, you'll control Pieberry with simple movement controls throughout the world. Instead of random encounters, enemies are denoted by red rings around them. One way the game keeps things cozy is that you're almost entirely in control over when you start fights. Crossing the red threshold of an enemy's influence ring will result in a prompt giving you a basic breakdown of the enemy's strength and details, as well as an option to fight or flee. If you're not ready to fight, Pieberry will just walk away. You're in total control over most of the conflict. The game doesn't offer experience and levels in the same way most RPGs would. Pieberry actually grows stronger through training, which are minigames that you can perform. Based on how well you play those minigames, you're awarded significant bonuses to Pieberry's growth stats. You can build Pieberry however you want. You can mix magic and melee, or pure magic. I personally have replayed the game 4 times just to try out different Pieberry builds and see how it changes the dynamic of the game. There is a small EXP system that denotes a certain combat level for Pieberry, and this caps out at level 5. The only way you can earn this kind of experience is by defeating unique groups of enemies. So once you defeat one particular group of enemies in an area, that encounter will no longer provide you with combat experience. The combat levels offer fixed bonuses to your combat stats that are further enhanced by your growth levels in either physical or magical competencies. Unlike other RPGs, Witchspring R doesn't really have a party system. In some story events, other characters from the story may join you in battle, but you won't have control over them. Instead, Witchspring R introduces a monster taming and pet system. Certain enemies are eligible to become pets, and Pieberry can use a special magic spell to mind control them to make them into her loyal subjects. She can then summon these pets in both battle and the overworld. Some of them can even be ridden as mounts. Finally, while Witchspring R eventually introduces you to shops and currency, the main way you'll be getting your supplies and upgrading your weapons is through crafting. Enemies you encounter will drop various items, and almost all of them are actually useful. Restoratives, weapon upgrades, buffs, and even magical spells themselves are all crafted in Pieberry's home. This is where most of you will experience the cozy vibes of this game. There's routine here. The game starts by literally having you walk Pieberry through her daily routine of hunting rabbits, gathering berries, and crafting basic supplies. As you progress through the game's story, you'll start building yourself a number of similar routines since resources, enemy respawns, and Pieberry's growth training points all accumulate with the passage of time, and time is calculated based on actions taken rather than an internal clock system. Soon, you'll have an entire circuit between narrative events of gathering items, farming enemies, crafting supplies, and performing upgrades through all stages of the game. And it's just as addictive and satisfying as your standard fare of cozy games like Stardew or Slime Rancher. But what keeps the game interesting? What separates it from games like Animal Crossing where the momentum eventually dies down and you get bored? The answer is friction, and it's not in all the places you would expect. Firstly, there's gameplay friction. In order to do the cozy things like crafting and gathering, you'll often need to fight enemies either for their resources or to clear a path for yourself. Secondly, the friction is in the narrative. Despite this bright, beautiful world and upbeat soundtrack, what's happening in the background is objectively concerning and terrible. Pieberry, and quite frankly the state of the world, is in danger. Even though you're relaxing and taking your time with the story, you know that it's something that will have to be dealt with eventually, and you're motivated to do so. It's similar to paying off your mortgage in Animal Crossing, only you're saving the entire world instead of your house. This narrative friction, these underlying conflicts at the heart of what you're doing, doesn't threaten the actual feelings of warmth and comfort you get from playing the game. You can spend as long as you want engaging in your routines for as long as they're satisfying. When you get the itch for something more, that's when you proceed with the story. This provides a competent and engaging gameplay loop: exploration, farming and gathering, crafting, pet taming, and story progression. This, combined with the amazing storytelling, makes Witchspring R an incredibly engaging and rewarding experience, which is why I hold it up as a prime example of what a modern RPG, especially a turn-based RPG, can be. The narrative tension is at the core of the game's presentation of friction. Sure, there's friction in the form of combat challenges, specific strategies need to be figured out, sometimes you need to backtrack, and sometimes you need to have crafted specific items or upgrades to progress. But the dark, heavy, serious themes of the story are what provides contrast to the game's incredibly cozy and whimsical aesthetic. Witchspring R is a cozy game. It's just everything that's cozy about it exists in defiance to the world it inhabits. And that's important. Not only does it remind us of the importance of seeing beauty in the world during the ugliest of times, but it also embodies the spirit of pressing on despite the darkness. Pieberry's unwavering positivity isn't a prescription, but a direct personification and embodiment of the indomitable human spirit, a visage not of what we ought to be, but what we should strive to be. Using Witchspring R to give us new context, we can now contrast what we just talked about with Animal Crossing New Horizons. Now, I'm not saying Animal Crossing needs a dark and gritty narrative in order to be interesting, quite the opposite. What I'm saying is that it fell flat for many players because warm, passive, cozy vibes were all the game really had to offer. It's basically a treadmill guiding you towards an endgame that ends up being shallow and unmotivating. Animal Crossing has no narrative spine, and no intrinsic stakes. The game relies entirely on player-driven meaning, and many players are going to derive that meaning from goals to accomplish. Once the player runs out of goals and struggles creating new ones afterwards, this results in drop-off. Animal Crossing attempts to rectify this with a constant refreshment of Nook Miles objectives for you to complete, but after a while, they stop feeling unique and just put you on yet another treadmill, amassing another currency for items you're quickly running out of space for. Animal Crossing New Horizons would benefit immensely from an endgame narrative or high time commitment challenges that take several days or weeks to complete. anything to provide some kind of motivation and facilitate goal setting. Once there are no more stakes, the time investment stops feeling meaningful. As a result, most players are doomed to walk away from the game bored once the endgame doesn't match the grind to get there. This isn't to say Animal Crossing is bad, it's merely an incomplete experience. If you want another example of cozy games done right, I think of Slime Rancher. In fact, when you say cozy game, I immediately think of Slime Rancher. Cute, adorable little slimes, beautifully whimsical art style, incredibly warming music, and a gameplay loop that is satisfying and simple. This is the game I turn to when it feels like nothing is going right in the world. It's my own little light in the abyss, and it offers much more friction than you'd probably expect. Slime Rancher revolves heavily around energy cycles and resource management, meaning you have to make the most of the resources you have on each day if you want to be an efficient rancher. During the day, Slime Rancher is relatively safe as the tar mostly shows up at night outside of a few areas. This means the player can choose their experience, daytime only playing for a safe and cozy experience, or an all hours experience for tension. But that's not the only form of tension in this game. There's long-term resource planning, and the stress of managing the chaos of your slime ranch as you get more and more slimes to farm those sweet, sweet plorts. But beyond all of that, there's still narrative tension. There's a story Slime Rancher is trying to tell you. Through the calls with your peers, cryptic writings of ranchers that have come before you, and esoteric clues strung throughout the world you interact with, the game is telling you that there are secrets to uncover. So while at first you may only be interested in farming slimes and making money to be the best rancher there ever was, the promise of treasures and secrets will compel you to seek them out. That's narrative tension, and it's powerful enough to spur you to take on difficult challenges and venture outside the safety and predictability of the routine you've crafted for yourself. Another example is Stardew Valley. While I personally haven't played much of it, I do understand that Stardew introduces friction in a unique way. While the initial premise of the game's story is enough to inspire and motivate, you're taking over a farm that's been entrusted to you, more narrative tension reveals itself in the stories of the characters you meet in town. You'll hear about their struggles, form relationships with them, and start to see how the town lives and breathes as the various challenges present themselves to you. This is just another example of taking a cozy game and giving it a little bit of stakes and narrative tension in order to keep a player engaged. Stardew's tension is interpersonal, not cosmic or survival-based. Stardew understands that emotional investment is friction. These are all examples of cozy done right: safe environment, gentle friction, and emotional stakes. I felt it was important to include some other examples so that I can show a common theme. Cozy is not the antithesis to tension. While it's important your cozy game makes the player feel safe and unpressured, this does not mean you can't add any stakes or tension to the game at all. This is why games like Pixelshire, Hucko Life, Fae Farm, and My Time at Portia fell short for many players. They lack any significant form of tension that keeps you seeking the blanket of comfort. This is a big part of why a lot of cozy games either fail or fall short on promises. This isn't because the developers are bad, but rather nervous. Cozy as a genre is an emerging one, and developers are still trying to figure out what makes it work for players. I'm simply providing an explanation as to why some do and some don't. All this serves to make the point that Witchspring R, in my opinion, thrives as a cozy game because it gives us emotional stakes, shows us character vulnerability, ties the progression to its narrative, and uses the cozy vibes to serve the story instead of replacing it. The cozy elements of the game are there to comfort you as it takes you through this heavy-handed emotional journey. Let's dive back into Witchspring R and start to wrap this up. Let's just really sit here with what Witchspring R is truly offering beneath its cozy veneer. This is a story built on loss, the ache of being orphaned, the terror of abandonment, the cruelty of persecution, and just so much trauma. Trauma suffered by someone far too young to even begin to understand it. Witchspring R keeps its world warm and inviting, but its narrative? It's devastating. And yet, you keep going. Because she keeps going. You'll spend just as much time crying with Pieberry as you do laughing with her, and you'll watch her break. But then, almost impossibly, you'll watch her get back up. The game gives us bravery, wrapped in cuteness, comfort woven directly into the punches it throws. It hands you tragedy in one hand and tenderness in the other. You watch Pieberry grow from a lost child to a curious and hopeful adolescent, finding strength not just through power fantasies, but through connection, through friendship, through found family, the kind of love that doesn't demand bloodlines or heritage, but the kind of love that we choose and the kind that chooses us back. And what is cozier than found family? Your native family is something that you're born into by chance, but your found family is something that you've had to seek out, construct, and maintain all on your own. You nurture it. You fight to keep it. For many of us, that experience is sacred. Your found family becomes the anchor that holds you steady when the world feels unlivable. It turns survival into living, and living into meaning. And that leads me to what I think is the ultimate missing link in cozy games. The thing that I think that most developers and players miss when they look at this genre. Cozy isn't about being safe. Cozy is about wanting to be safe. There's no denying that Witchspring R is both cozy and painful, and that tension is what gives the game its soul. When I picked it up, I couldn't put it down. The story is magnificent for what it sets out to be. The gameplay is rich with clever systems, and every layer of the experience feels deliberate. Despite the heavy subject matter, Witchspring R is safe. It is warm. It is cozy. But the warmth, safety, and comfort isn't the product. It's the reward. And that's the part that so many cozy games miss. Comfort without meaning is just noise. It fades. It evaporates. It slips through your fingers the moment the novelty wears off. But comfort with meaning, that stays. This brings us back to one of the most fundamental questions that permeates the human experience. Does happiness have any meaning without the hardship and sadness to make us appreciate it? Witchspring R understands something that many of these games do not. The warmth and safety of the fire is good, but we only truly appreciate it in the cold. Safety is most appreciated when we know there is danger. Comfort matters most when you need it. That's the contrast that makes cozy, well, cozy. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of something worth healing for. Witchspring R reminds us that true satisfaction isn't found in perpetual comfort, but in the elements of life that spark us to seek it. Thank you so much for watching. I started this little project of making video essays almost 3 short months ago, and thanks to your guys' overwhelming support, we've already reached partner status here on YouTube. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. These videos take a lot of time and resources to make, so if you found this one insightful, consider subscribing so you can be notified when I drop the next one. If you're able, also consider supporting the channel by becoming a member, subscribing to my Patreon, or just buying me a coffee. Caffeine will definitely get the next video done a little faster. I'd also like to offer my heartfelt thanks to the very first patrons of the channel. Thank you all so much for your support. Take care of yourselves, and don't forget that I love you.